Welcome to Yelling into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm your host, Tevin and Scott Daly joins me as always. Scott, I got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Uh, what happened to Galakron?
He's dead.
Yeah, but like at the beginning of this expansion, we were all like, oh, it'd be so cool if Galakron was a final raid boss and he comes back and we got to fight him again. And he's this giant dragon.
Yeah, but
What happened to that?
he died 10,000 years ago. That's what happened to that. He's been dead for 10,000 years.
Yeah, but we fought dead things before.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think this game knows how to fight really, really large things. I mean, like the most famous example of this is the Spine of Deathwing, which was like the idea at that the Cataclysm expansion proposed was you're gonna get to fight this giant dragon at the end of the expansion. And I do wonder what the meeting was like when they're like, all right, time to design the giant dragon fight. How are we gonna do that?
I vividly remember like fighting Kill Jaden in Legion, and then like the whole cutscene happens with Sargeras, and he's just like this massive, like 5 times the size of our planet, and just like I don't know. And it would have been so cool to fight Sargeras, but like it's never gonna happen. What are we gonna? We're gonna fight his baby toe?
Yeah, I mean,
That's it.
Either they just have to invent a narrative reason to shrink these people down to normal boss.
Well, they enlarge everybody who gets made a boss.
Yeah, I know, but to like a non-ridiculous level. Like the most this game can do is that it's done with like the Kill Jaden fight in Black not Black Temple, in Sunwell, and those type of fights where they're just like half their body is sticking out of a portal and they're just stuck rooted at one half of the screen. That's like the most they can do. And they even did that with the Deathwing fight, right? The Madness of Deathwing, he's just kind of rooted in place.
His neck's sticking out.
I just like unfortunately, I agree with you. The Galakron fight would have been a fun idea. I just don't think the game can do. I mean, like, Jesus, the Razageth fight that we're going to be talking about here today, she wasn't that big, and still, it's like your fucking wings are blocking. I can't see. So yeah, they have enough problems with that stuff.
Well, anyways, that aside, I'm sure we'll get into more of that on the topic today, because today we are going to be talking about kind of a raid retrospective for Dragonflight. But as always, try and get some of the other news out of the way before we get onto the main topic. At least cover the things that we aren't going to cover in depth on the podcast today. So today is July 30th. And today is also the day that the Rise of the Zandalari patch, I think that's what it's called, came out in Cataclysm. I honestly, I don't know. Do you have much to add on this? I don't really think there's much to cover. You get gear that's worse than the gear that you would have got if you've been raiding the whole time. And it doesn't, like, outside of a mount, there's no reason to do it.
It is a very interesting patch. I remember playing the game when this patch came out, and everyone was like, what? and that's kind of the same thing that I honestly was expecting them to do a little bit something different this time. I was expecting them to maybe change the item level of the gear, to maybe do something different, to add something to it, to do something, recognizing that this is kind of a weird patch. To call this phase 2 of Cataclysm Classic is kind of a joke. It's not. There's 2 dungeons, and look, I like those 2 dungeons. I think they're fun. They're 2 raids that were very enjoyable when they first came out. I didn't do Zul'Gurub in Classic because I didn't raid in Classic, but I did do the 10-man Zolaman. I probably got carried so hard on a healer in Burning Crusade, but I had no idea what was going on. I was just in there with people. And that was a fun raid, and they're fun as 5-mans. It's cool. I've got a couple blue pieces on my character that I guess it's going to be good to finally replace with something. But yeah, it's weird. I like Cataclassic feels very strange right now in that I just feel like it might have one developer for half that developer's time, and that's about it.
The weirdest thing about it with me is, like, we've went through Cataclysm already once, and it failed because of just the lack of attention from Blizzard initially. And then Firelands came out and everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." But like, why are we just redoing this over? Like, this is literally the like, "Oh, well, I guess we ignored it before, we might as well ignore it now" kind of argument. And it's just I don't know. Like, we have from Wrath, they have the concept of like the gamma and beta dungeons. And like I know they didn't come out until the second raid came out in Wrath, and that's probably what's gonna happen in Kata, but
Mm-hmm.
like this would have been the perfect time to start dropping that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I was looking this up because I was curious. The original Kata came out in December of 2010, and the Rise of the Zandalari patch came out April 26th, 2011. So it was over 5 months, which is definitely not as long as we had, right? Like Kata Classic came out in May, and so it's been a little over 2 months now. So that's definitely a faster cadence, but like it still feels weird. It still feels
Yeah.
like this is a nothing burger. And I mean, we're in this really interesting place right now in our guild progression where we kind of started slow and are finally starting to ramp up and kill bosses. So like we're trying desperately to clear the raid on heroic before the War Within comes out, and like I just look at this and oh, this is not going to help us in any meaningful way to do that. So I don't care about
Mhm.
it. And that feels weird. I mean, ultimately, like having catch up systems in this game is a good thing, but like you're absolutely right that in Wrath of the Lich King they built a catch up system, a pretty good catch up system into the classic version of the game, that worked very well, and to just leave this patch as is, as its own kind of weird intermittent catch up system. It's very strange. It's very strange. I think they should have just released this as part of 4.0 and just thrown it out there and just had these dungeons there from the beginning, and you could just do
Yep.
them, and then maybe accelerate. It's so funny because when they first released the schedule of Kata Classic with the dates that everything was coming out on a calendar, everyone's reaction was, "That's really fast. That's really fast. We're gonna do Kata in May, and then Firelands in October, and then Dragon Soul in January, and then we're done. That feels really fast." In retrospect, it doesn't actually. It feels
Yeah.
perfectly fine, if maybe even still a little bit slow. I mean, we haven't cleared the raid yet, so right, it's like Firelands coming out right now would be both exciting and a bummer because we would move on to Firelands, but we also would not have gotten an opportunity to clear the raid, which would feel crummy. But I don't know. I don't know. Kata, it's weird. It's very weird right now.
I do have a question for you before we move away from this topic.
Uh huh.
So we have like we take it for granted in retail at this point because I think it was like Miss Pandaria or something like that the last time this happened. Um, but anyways, we pretty much every tier we get one raid,
Hmm.
and like all of the bosses for the tier are contained in that raid. And like going back into Kata, where we have 13 bosses across 3 different raids, like I like the fact that we can go to different raids, but I kind of hate the fact that we have to go to different raids every day, like or every weekend. I mean,
Yeah, it's so funny because I definitely was, before the release of Kata Classic, the guy going like, it's kind of lame that we only get one raid, and like I like that multiple raids can give you multiple aesthetics, and I like the idea of like a one or two boss raid every so often. I think that's a fun idea. It mixes things up, and yeah, after progging in the first tier of Kata, I'm just like, no, no, this is a pain in the ass, especially since like I guess it would be one thing if the progression path through these raids was linear. Like one raid was in and of itself just overall easier, and then you step up to the next raid. But yeah, this idea of like, okay, we got to go do these two bosses in this one, then we got to jump over to that one and do that boss, then we got to jump back to this third one and do those three bosses, and then like man, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I can't believe I'm saying this. 13 bosses, that's too many. That's too many bosses. That's a lot of bosses. And for a guild like ours that is raiding 6 hours a week, even if we were not slow to start like we were, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to full clear a raid in which you don't have every single boss on definite easy farm. If you need a few kills per farm boss because random shit happens, uh, it it makes clearing tough. Like we're at the point right now where we're like, okay, we got 6 weeks, we got 7 bosses to kill in 6 weeks. We're gonna have to extend. We're gonna have to basically abandon farming the other heroic bosses we've killed. We're gonna have to toss all that away, and arguably we should have done it earlier. It's just really hard to know when is the right time to make that call. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't help but think 6 out of 13 in Firelands would be one boss away from clearing the raid.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I just think it's the weirdest thing to, because like in on paper it seems so cool to have 3 different raids, but
Yeah.
it just does not feel the greatest. But
It's just,
like,
I mean, you just there's limited amount of time, and it's so hard to get people together
and they're
to
so
do these
far
raids.
away from each other,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. If only we
But
had,
anyways,
only we had Guild Will Travel or whatever it was, but we had to take
it
that away.
oh yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to have that though. Not allowed to have nice things.
Nope.
Um, so the next thing up on the list for us, and this is a big one. So I'm sure we'll get into more depth on this maybe some other time. But Arc just got nerfed today.
Hell
Like a
yeah.
lot.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
Like a lot. So if you just look at the nerfs as they're written on paper, you're just like, oh, that's not that bad. But when you stop and think about it, you're like, no, 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 this class was just nerfed by like a quarter. Like
Yeah.
more than a quarter in Mythic Plus, at least.
Yeah. It's pretty rough. I mean, it's a 25% give or take nerf for their Ebb and Might. And then on top of that, it's another 10% nerf for both Ebb and Might and Breath of the Eons.
Yeah,
Because Closest Clutchmates is just gone.
Yeah.
Which, for those who don't know, Closest Clutchmates was just a talent that you would take in 5-man content that makes it to where if you are not being able to hit more than 5 people, I don't remember the actual wording on it. Essentially, it only worked in 5-man content, but
Yeah.
it buffed your Breath of Eons and your Ebb and Might by 10%.
Yeah.
Both of them.
There's all kinds of abilities like this that scale differently based off of what type of content you're doing. Like Disc Priest's Atonement in a 5-man will just heal more than it does in a raid because they can't, because it's very difficult to kind of balance those values to make one good in one, but then not incredibly overpowered in another. And that's essentially the same thing that was happening with Augmentation Evoker when they first came out, is that this thing that they were doing when it was only affecting 2 DPS and a tank and a healer, like, would scale incredibly high when affecting 4 just DPS, right? And so they had to put a cap on that, and they decided to do it, to nerf it generally, but then buff it in that 5-man content. It was a good fix, but yeah, that thing had already been nerfed. Like when it first came out, it was much more powerful than it is now, and so they had nerfed it once already, and then they've decided to take it away. So I mean, Tevin, like when we talked about Ogvoker a couple weeks ago, it was basically like, this is definitely going to be in the meta. And then last week with the tank changes, we were like, oh, this is like super meta now. It's like required.
Yep.
And now, I mean, 35% reduced effectiveness. You're taking a big DPS hit to bring an Augmentation Evoker, like a big one.
Well, you're taking... It's massive, dude.
Yeah.
It's like the main stat is just one thing, but like 10% on Breath of Eons. Like, think of it this way. Aug is already doing less DPS than taking a DPS is.
Yeah.
Like that is just factually true before the nerfs. And then the nerfs come in, and now their main cooldown that they're lining up with mages and shadow priests right now just got nerfed. On top of their 30-second buff that they're trying to maintain, got nerfed by 35% in 5-man content. And so, like, it's huge. I don't want to say it's going to make Aug awful. I mean, you still get a bunch of survivability just passively from the Aug mastery, but like, it's a huge damage loss at this point.
I still think we'll see at least one, maybe two in mythic raids, because the best players in the world can play it the most efficiently to maximize its benefit, and I think it still will be good enough that that's worth it. I do think it's tough to see it in high keys. I mean, I'm let's just say this could be a large overreaction that we're looking at the numbers and we're like, oh wow, that's dead. It's a dead class now. No one's ever going to bring it. I don't know if it's going to be that bad. I will say, like in uncoordinated pug groups, I do not see myself taking an AUG because like the best way to use an AUG is to be very intentional and coordinated with how you do your buffs. It's the way to maximize its DPS, and so like in a set 5-man team, even with these nerfs, it still could be pretty good. But in a pug, there's no way you're going to coordinate and communicate that well. So I think it's dead in pugs, like full stop.
Yeah.
And I just don't think the survivability that it grants, even with the tank nerfs, is going to be enough to overcome the DPS hit you take. I think based on the keys that we've done on beta and what I'm seeing from other players that are trying to push the 12s on beta right now just to test them out, the timers in season 1 are going to be really really tight. It's going to be, one thing we said we wanted to go back to, which was that timers matter. It seems like we're going there, and I think this is going to be too much of a DPS loss. So I don't see it in meta right now. I don't.
I honestly, I don't want all of the AUG players out there to hate me, but I kind of hope that it isn't meta. It's been meta since it was released,
Yeah.
dude. So I'm ready for a season where AUG isn't in the god comp, the meta comp.
I agree. I think the one thing I'll say about this that makes me a little bit sad is I think we talked about how to solve the OG problem, right? We offered several possible examples of how to do this. One was change how it works and make it so it's not buffing as much of other people's, and increasing, compensating for it with increases in DPS. And then also maybe taking away the survivability factor from its buffs a little bit, making it just a kind of DPS funnel type class. And then the other was just nerfing it so badly that nobody wants to play it anymore. And it feels like they went with the latter of those two options. And maybe this is
Yeah.
just a stopgap thing while they kind of continue to try to analyze and figure things out. I don't know. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But it seems like they've just said, we can't figure this out. So let's just nerf it. And then no one will play it. And the problem will have fixed itself.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get the poor feral druid treatment, and it just becomes like the the stepchild Blizzard never wanted.
I hope so.
but
But yeah.
but anyways, all of that to say, today we are talking about Dragonflight raids. So I've been waiting for a while to talk about this. So um, as the weeks go on, the next couple weeks are going to be all retrospective stuff for Dragonflight as we are ramping up for the War Within. So you will see, dungeon recaps and retrospectives, and then Dragonflight as a whole, all the systems and stuff associated with that. So today we're talking about raids, and ironically, our guild decided that they wanted to talk about raids in retrospective today. So we've already been a little bit presupposed to some of this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess you want to just start off with Vault. I guess that
Yeah.
makes the most logical sense.
I do want to put a little caveat here at the beginning of the conversation, though, that, we are not Mythic Raiders, or at least not yet. We don't, I think I killed 3 bosses on Mythic this entire expansion. And it was like the first boss in each of the raids, because I'm not that into pugging raids. It's not like fun for me to pug raids. So I don't do it very often. I think I just like pugged a couple bosses, just to try to get some of the very rare loot or something. But so, I mean, I think there's plenty of people out there that could talk very intelligently about what they think of the mythic versions of these fights. That's not us, but I think we do have some
Yeah.
things to say about, the raid as a whole, and of course what progging AOTC in these raids in this expansion looks like.
I do think as well with some of the mythic stuff too. Like we may have some comments just from watching like Race to World First. Like we are fairly well versed in like what happens in mythic. We just
Mhm.
haven't experienced it firsthand. So what there the one thing the reason I bring this up is because it was one comment that you actually made today, just in passing, where like you can tell when a boss fight was made on the mythic version and then like pieces of it were stripped away for heroic and normal
Yeah.
versus a boss that was made for the normal version with stuff added for heroic and mythic.
That is kind of the worst part about not being a mythic raider is when you can definitely tell that like they had this really great idea for a boss and it was a really cool mechanic and they developed it with this mechanic and then they were like, okay, how do we scale this mechanic down for the easier difficulties? And they either can't figure it out or it just won't scale down. And so the conclusion is just like, okay, just take it out or just remove it.
Mhm.
And it does. There's always those fights that I've noticed, at least since I've come back to the game, where you do it and it's like, it doesn't, it feels like this is half of a boss. It feels like this is missing some core part of the boss that makes it a boss and a fun encounter. And I think we got a few of those in this expansion for sure.
So, well, I guess starting off with Vault of the Incarnates. So, um, do we talk about the whole intermission part of whatever you have to do before you fight the first boss in this raid? Because I found that extremely annoying. The first time you did it, it was cool, it was fun, and then you had to do it every single week that you wanted to fight this boss, and potentially twice if you're doing it on normal and heroic. I don't
This
know.
this is essentially the problem with everything in raids is they want to do these things because they're fun and exciting. And I think it is. I think it's a cool like aesthetic choice to be like, all right, we're in this raid and we're gonna break in. And so let's hop on some dragons and bomb some of the masses of the primalists in order to break in and kind of push into the thing. And that's cool. Um first of all, I don't think the vehicle combat in this game has ever been like fun. It's just mashing buttons over and over again. But I mean, it is fun and cool. I guess I'm gonna give a what I guess is a hot take here. I like that raids in World of Warcraft have trash in them. I I like I like the feeling of entering a place where there are, yes, bosses, but like it's a building, and as you traverse the building you're encountering different groups of enemies and pushing your way through and getting to the boss room. I like this feeling of progression through the raid, not just boss to boss, but like making your way through the fortress or the castle or the building. I like that feeling, and I think trash is an important part of that feeling. I do not like the boss rush type. Like I do not enjoy Final Fantasy's raid structure as much because it's just, four bosses, and like, not to think the bosses aren't good, but I think there is something to the raid of as a place that we're breaking into. And the only reason I'm bringing this up now is because I do think this dragon riding thing at the very beginning of this raid is part of that experience, and so I don't dislike it. Now I'll say, while that is true, I do think every single raid fight should let you respawn at the raid encounter. Once you have cleared the trash into the boss room, you should just get to restart in the boss room. There's no reason to not do that. Um, I hate that we're like, there's several fights in some of the raids in this expansion that they just do that you just like, you get to spawn right where the boss is again after you die, and it's like, oh man, this is the best. And then there's fights like Razageth where for some reason you don't get to spawn on that platform. What you get to do is spawn next to a dragon. You have to ride to that platform, which literally 50% of the time will DC you and resulting in your death. A thing that has been true the entire expansion and they still haven't fixed.
Yeah, so I'm actually with you. I'm not I don't love trash. But I do like that it does some of the like what do you call it? Like narrative storytelling, but like just through in like environments and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
environmental storytelling, I think it is.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, let me be clear here. I don't like killing trash. Like I don't enjoy killing trash. I just think like the price to pay to get this kind of better environment feeling that a raid has is I have to kill trash, and that generally is a price I'm willing to pay. It doesn't mean I enjoy it. It's not the fun part of the raid for me. But I don't mind it. I think I'm willing to pay that price.
Yeah, I do like that you have to physically walk through the raid.
Yeah.
I'm with you, or I don't like how Final Fantasy does the like you just load in and you're at the boss, boom, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but on the other hand, I do like that when you're ready to prog on something, you just get to prog on it.
Yeah.
That's the nice part.
The part I don't think the trash should respawn either.
Yeah,
I don't understand why that's a thing still. Like that just seems silly. You kill it, it's dead for the week. You can move on.
yeah, yeah. So all of that aside, we get to the first boss in Vault, and I am
I need
blanking
to
on his name. I think it's Aranog.
thank you. I was like frantically bringing up the list because I was like, I don't remember who this guy
The
was.
problem is, the problem is our guild comes up with nicknames for all of these bosses, and all I can think of is Eggnog because we called him Eggnog forever.
Well, it was Christmas
Uh,
time when this raid came out, so
but anyways, for a first boss, I honestly think that this boss was fine. So, a theme that you're going to get from me for Vault of the Incarnates is the majority of these bosses were fine. They were decent. They like I didn't have bad feelings about them. There are a few standout bosses there. And then Razageth, I have a
I,
love hate relationship with.
I feel
So
like
we'll
we're going
get
to
to
spend
that.
most of our time talking about Razageth and probably the
Yeah.
least amount of time talking about Eggnog because I agree with you. Like the honest truth I have about this boss is I don't remember it. I know it was the one where there's the circle of flame guys and you have to kill one of the flame guys to break the
Mhm.
chain and then stand there.
There-
But I'm pretty sure everyone who played this game one shot this boss on every difficulty they played it on. Like it's hard for me to believe that people didn't one shot this boss. And like, look, it's the first boss of a raid. Like what we have here is the first boss of an expansion, not just the first boss of a raid. And so it is by design going to just be one that falls over.
Yep.
And yeah, it's fine. I don't think about it. I don't remember it. Um, I, I guess the thing that we'll say is just like talking about design philosophy in general of the raid is Dragonflight has introduced this idea of the very rare item, right? This is a new thing they did where certain bosses will drop a really really good thing but more rarely. And I appreciate the design of here's this really good thing. In Aranog's case it was the fire ring, right? Yeah, there's a
Yep.
fire ring. um and this is a thing that almost every DPS class is going to want. In fact, I think some tanks liked it a lot too. It's just a really, really, really good ring for everyone, and they made it very accessible because it's the first boss of the expansion. I mean, even on Mythic, I don't even know what the Mythic ability that they added for this boss was,
There's a
but
second fire ring.
oh,
It
okay.
comes from the inside out,
Oh
so you
my
get like
god.
sandwiched between them.
Oh my god. What? How do you beat that? This is too hard.
Split your
Um,
DPS, man. I don't know.
yeah, it's just like whatever. Like I don't have a lot of expectations for the first boss. I think it's very easy to make a bad first boss. Because historically they've tried to get really gimmicky with it. Like the recent examples is the first boss of Sepulchre, which is just awful. I hate that boss. Because like it's you like you have to do all these stupid other steps before the stupid ball falls out of the door and you can fight the ball. And I
It rolls
just
over your tank and kills him.
yeah. Um, yeah, I think this is at best harmless, fine first encounter of a raid.
Yeah. So that brings us to the next boss. And so I guess the next one that we went to was Taros.
Yeah,
So I guess that is the order we'll go in now.
sure.
So we did Taros and then we did, what was her name? Sonarth? Is that it? Is that the
Uh, is that
spider? I
the
need to just
the
pull up the
spider? The
raid.
spider is Sinarth. Yes, I have it right here.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we did Taros next. Taros was just it was okay. I mean, it was a stand there, hit the boss, and then move. every so often kind of fight. So
It was
that
fun as
one
a
was
healer.
honestly, yeah, it was more on your healers and tanks than it was a DPS.
Yeah, it was fun as a healer because the damage spikes were very, very predictable. And so you just got to do the fun thing healing, which is like you're saving all your shit, and here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. Okay, we're gonna blow up the columns, and then bam, there's gonna be a lot of healing, and you're just ready, and you just see your numbers go up, and it's fun. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like, I think people really liked the mythic version of this fight, to the point where they're like, the big thing they had to say about it was they wish it was later in the raid because it could have been a little bit more complicated than it was if it was later in the raid. I mean, I
Mhm.
like these. I think fights that have kind of like space management, and the DPS check of the fight is you're going to run out of room eventually. I like that as a gimmick. So I like the idea that he's slowly like making quarters of the room unusable. But again, like even on heroic version, the check wasn't tight enough for that ever really to matter. Like the ideal situation in those kind of fights is like you're watching as like he's going to power up the thing that's going to cut out the last pie slice, and you're like racing against DP at the time, and even the ideal kill is like he's already laid down the stuff on that pie slice, and you're slowly dying one by one, and you kill it right as
Yep.
right, like that's the ultimate like goal of that kind of design. But this is one of those ones that on heroic version it's just never going to be tuned that tightly.
Mhm.
It's just going to kind of fall over. I mean, I think on our first kill we maybe barely got like the third of the fourth slices.
Yeah.
And it just didn't even feel particularly close. Yeah, as long as you've got the a moderate amount of DPS and decent healing, this boss just kind of falls over.
I will say I completely agree with what you're saying. Like I enjoy the like either running out of space or like running out of like for example with Sledge Fist in
Hmm.
um oh boy, what was the raid called with the Nathrius? Oh, I'm blanking so hard right
The
now.
Denathrius raid.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I have an
Anyways,
excuse because I didn't play. So
I'm blanking so hard on it, and it'll come back to me. But man, Sledge Fist was so cool because
mhm.
you had the four pillars, and then next was just you die or you kill him, and like
Mhm.
that's so much cooler than an enrage where it's just like, oh well, it's been 10 minutes, the boss is just going to deal 60% more damage now.
Yeah, yeah. I would much rather them build the enrage into the environment of the fight than just have like a 10-minute random he kills you now
Hmm.
thing. Yeah.
So uh I think for Taros, there's not really much else for me to cover.
I
So
think the
that
only
brings us to
sorry,
oh
the only other thing I want to say about Taros is like another problem that this raid introduced, um in that Taros as a boss had generally shitty loot, and there was a problem with how the vault worked in this raid early on in the expansion, where the vault would only populate with boss loot for bosses that you had killed previously. And so a lot of the top guilds, when trying to ensure best quality vault, were just skipping several bosses and just not doing them, so they never got credit for killing them, so they never had that loot pollute their vault, which was like a shitty thing, and I'm glad that that was fixed later because that's just anti-fun. That should never happen. But I just thought it was worth bringing that up here because
yeah,
Taros is like the poster child of that problem, I think.
I didn't even think about that because our guild at the time didn't do it. But yeah, I that is something that I remember reading, and I was like, oh, that's that's probably a good change.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
definitely.
um, Sonarth is next, and man, this fight I have done on both melee and ranged, and it's just not fun
No,
as a melee. Like,
it's not
as
a
a
fun
range
fight.
player, it's fine. You can
No.
get so far ahead of the boss and you can like stay back. It's not that bad. But as a melee, dude, like you have to be like the boss's hitbox is large enough that you can be stood back, but you have half the time of a range player to react to the pull. And like the ideal thing is you like get pulled into a web and then you stop moving or whatever. But like half the time the webs go on like a range player, and now you don't have a web to stand in. And I don't know. It just felt not fun. And then the fact that like you can push the boss too fast that she just like skips a platform and jumps all the way to the top, and now you're spending 20 seconds of doing nothing but running to the top of the boss room to kick it so that you don't die. I don't know. Not a great boss in my opinion.
This is my least favorite. Well, okay, second least favorite boss in this raid. I think this is a bad boss. I don't like. I think it's a fun idea conceptually. Like drawing it up on paper, you can kind of see where they got excited about the idea. It's like, oh, we're gonna fight the spider, and like she's gonna yank everyone towards her, and we have this icy platform we have to manage, and she's gonna slowly climb the spiral. Like aesthetically, that's a really cool idea. And then the end of the fight will be at the top of the spiral as a race against time, as more of the ground is it's kind of the exact thing we were just talking about with this kind of artificial enrage built into it. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it sounds great on paper, not fun when you actually play it. No part of this is fun. I don't even
Yeah.
think like at range. Like I was a ranged healer during this fight, and I was not ever having any fun. And it's not even that it's that difficult on heroic. Like it's not. I think we killed this really quickly, but it's just not fun. It's not fun to play.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Like I said, my rant was the fact that this was okay for ranged and terrible for melee. Like
Yeah.
I hated this boss on my monk, doubly because at the time monk had Kiefer Sky Fury, which dashed you to the fucking boss. So it's like you're running away, and then I'm just like melee brain spamming Tiger Palm, and then I just get jumped to the boss, and then I get yanked, and it's like, well, shit, what now? So yeah, not a
This
fun boss as melee.
this is one of those fights where I was so absorbed in healing people and also like not getting yanked into the center and off the platform that I don't think I looked at this boss during any of the kills like ever. I was just never actually like looking. Like if you had like said pay you $100 to tell me where in the spiral the boss is right now, I don't fucking know. I'm just like the only thing I did is like, oh, my teammates are running up the ramp now. I guess the boss has raised up to the next level. I guess I'll run up the ramp, and that's really all I did. And most of the time, my camera was facing the wall, because there was no reason to look towards the center.
Well, the next boss actually. So I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or not, but I fucking loved the next boss. So it is Grim Totem, and man, this boss was so cool for me. Like, it was annoying in the fact that like the lightning phase sucked ass, like the lightning quarter. But outside of that, like, dude, this boss was like not S tier on my list, but I'd say he's a solid A tier on my list. This boss was amazing for me, DPS wise.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Grim Totem, awesome boss. Awesome boss. I like the idea that you can kind of dictate how you want the fight to go by getting to pick which quadrants you're in and when do you move and transition to each quadrant. I think the mythic version of this fight added additional ads, which took all the fun of this boss and ruined it. So it's one of the rare fights where I'm like, I think this is better on heroic than it is on mythic, because those just damage sponge ads are anti-fun. But as a healer, like this was one of the first bosses of the expansion where I was like, okay, this is really actually pushing my healing. I remember like my highest parsing numbers in the raid up until this point were on this boss, and it felt like as a healer what you want to feel is you get to pump, but also you like feel that you are driving the success of the raid. Like sometimes like just the bars are going up and you don't really feel it. This
Hmm.
is a boss where like I felt it. I felt like even when we made mistakes on this boss and we were like late on dragging it to the new quadrant, or like people were getting hit by shit they shouldn't, I was like saving the raid. I was like pumping and saving the raid. And it's a good boss. It's a really good boss. I like this a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Grim Totem was amazing. He also like he had good loot. Like he had a super good trinket, multiple
Mm,
good trinkets actually.
yeah.
Um, this Grim Totem was just, by all accounts, in my opinion, a fun as hell boss.
Yeah.
The ad phase was like short enough that it wasn't annoying,
Yeah.
and had enough mechanics to it that it didn't just feel like, oh, well, now you're just only fighting two ads and they don't do anything. Your tanks are just going to tank them together and you're going to cleave them down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I felt like they really nailed it with the normal and heroic versions of this fight. This is one that I didn't watch too much on the Race to World first, so Mythic might have sucked. So I don't
I
have
mean,
much of an idea on that.
they kind of just cheesed it by like they held it in one quadrant for a long because basically because I think in the Mythic version every time you switch to a new quadrant, even outside of the ad phase, every time you moved him to a new quadrant, an ad spawned every single time. And so basically it just became a fight of like we need to not only like the design of the fight, I think written was like, okay, we're gonna have to make them make serious choices about when they're gonna move to a new quadrant and try to last in a quadrant as long as possible. The mythic strategy just became, we're just gonna sit in this one quadrant the whole fucking fight until like the very end, and when we can't survive it anymore, which just turns the whole quadrant management system into just boring and shitty, and it's just like
Yeah.
it makes you sad. So yeah, that's a bummer.
The next boss, in my opinion, was another banger boss. But to clarify, any boss that's a council fight where you can hit multiple things at the same time,
Such a fucking
all
DPS
your
take.
DPS are gonna fucking love this boss. So,
Such a
like, as a
DPS take.
person who only plays DPS, really, this boss fucking gas. So, council is the next one. Um, I mean, really, there's not a ton to say here. It was don't spread your lightning to other people and go stand in the fire when the ice stuff's happening. Like, it was a pretty straightforward boss, which made it even better for DPS because they got to stand there and do nothing but hit four bosses all at the same time.
This boss sucks. I don't know why they insist on having a council fight every single raid. Sometimes you just don't have a good idea for a council fight, and that's okay. So just don't do it. Um, it's such a boring fight. It's like it's chaotic, but in like a boring way because none of it matters. Like, oh no, I screwed up this one thing. Oh, that doesn't actually matter at all. Um, no, I know this is a bad one. No, you're wrong. Wrong.
No, 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 no.
DPS take.
All of
Stupid
the
DPS take.
DPS would disagree with you. This
Yeah,
boss
because
was
you
fucking
fucking
gas.
animals are just like, hey, numbers.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
want my numbers to go up. Stupid. What about
So
mechanics? What about challenge? No, just press my
no,
button.
there were some mechanics. There were some mechanics.
No,
You had to kick
no,
things.
no, no.
We had to kick things.
Oh yeah, that's
We
really
had to
one
point the
kick.
bosses away so that they didn't hit us.
Okay, okay.
The next boss was by far my least favorite boss in the raid. Actually, yeah, I think she was my least favorite boss. Dathia. Dathia sucked. Dathia on normal was a absolute fucking joke of a
Yeah.
boss, and Dathia on heroic added a mechanic that I hope they never do again. Like, it was the most annoying garbage ever. So like when they split, so essentially what happens on heroic is you get this ad and it does this giant knockback. You get it on normal too, but you have to use it to like knock you to these side platforms to kill ads
Mm-hmm.
that are just buffing the boss the whole time if they don't die. So um I think this whole idea of like half your raid does this and half your raid does that is like really cool,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that you had to use these ads that just like knocked you to Timbuktu, just I don't know. It wasn't good as far as an implementation was concerned. And then the other part that like sucked fucking ass is if you died on that platform, you're just screwed for the rest of like
Yeah.
your body doesn't get teleported back. You can't get B-res. Like I don't know. Not a
Yeah.
great boss.
I agree with you. One of those things that I think sounds like a really fun idea. I think it is cool to get like knocked to a separate section and have like your strike team of players go off and kind of do their own like mini 5-man encounter. I think that's fun and neat, and then like join the rest. Like there's always this really fun feeling, especially as a healer, when like you're off doing your own thing on this other platform and you're like looking at the main team and like you're watching their health bars go down and they're struggling to stay alive, and it's like you finish killing your guy and like launch back and land and just like, haha, we're here, you're saved. That's a cool fun feeling, but it was so gimmicky and weird. That I also think like the tank mechanic on this fight was really bad. Wasn't it just like the tank gets knocked back and that like I feel like we struggled with it stupidly for too long that it became just annoying. Um,
Yeah.
and then also like the tank having to position themselves, you know, in the center of the room still, but not far enough away. Like they're gonna get knocked back by the ad knockback, but not in the right way. It's just yeah, I did not enjoy this one.
Yeah, we had a paladin and a death knight as our tanks for this fight, and like the death knight can stop the knockback
Yeah.
with death's advance or whatever, but the paladin cannot. And the death knight, I don't remember if you can get every single one or not, but if nobody's in melee with the boss, she just hits the next person on threat. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was frustrating. um
I also think so. One of the things this game really likes to do sometimes is have incredibly high damage events during situations in which the game is forcing you to move. And that, as a healer, is one of the most fucking annoying things in the world because you're just like,
yeah.
oh, I guess I just can't do that right now. And the suck in mechanic I think was cool, like having to run against a tornado as it's trying to suck you in. But also, there's like a lot of damage going out during that phase, and I'm like, okay, um, I'm gonna trank and like watch as I'm slowly being sucked in and trying to finish this trank channel, like hoping I'm gonna keep, and then like I hate managing that. I really hate when this game does things like we're gonna throw 500 swirlies on the ground and also everyone's gonna be taking massive ticking damage, and you healers just kind of just figure that out. Just figure it out.
Yeah, Dathia sucked. Also,
Oh yeah.
not going to talk about this for every boss, but the achievement for this boss was fucking garbage too.
This is the only
So
raid we did all the achievements for, and yeah, this was the one where we're just like, this is stupid. I hate this.
we spent like an entire night trying to get
Yeah.
this stupid fucking
Yeah, so
achievement.
so the if people don't know, the achievement for this one is there's a bunch of like floating orbs around the boss arena, and to get the achievement, you need to collect all of the orbs and kill the boss. And some of them are pretty easy to reach. Basically, what you have to do is you have to get hit by the knockback, aim yourself correctly to where you knock back into the ball. But some of them are like way higher up than others to where like naturally just using the knockback, it didn't feel like we had proper control over it. Um,
Yeah,
and essentially, I think
not fun.
the way we did it was our demon hunter like cheesed it because they're a demon hunter.
Yeah, no, that fucking it sucked ass. That
Mhm.
achievement, like I almost just didn't want to get the glory achievement because of that.
Yeah,
Which like I don't get it normally, but we decided one raid night that we wanted to go for it. So
yeah.
but that brings us to probably my next least favorite. I would say this is my third. Like if we're going bottom up, this is probably my tied for second for my least favorite in the raid, which is Diurna. And so I was on the egg team for Diurna because I was playing a hunter at the time, and like that was fine. But also, all of my friends got to go kill ads and have big numbers, and I was just sat hitting the boss the whole time, and that was kind of sad. But yeah, I don't know that like the fact that you had to have like kind of a specific path to like not have the ads close enough to the boss, which would buff the boss, but then you also had to do like on heroic, it made it way more annoying because sometimes you had to break 3 eggs, which means that the tank also had to break an egg, and so I don't know, man. This boss was just kind of it was there.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it.
I think I liked it a little bit better than you. I do like, as we talked about, having separate teams responsible for different things, like having an ad team and like a boss team. I think was fun. I the manner in which you have to break the eggs felt gimmicky to me in an unfun way. Like you like it just. I don't know. It wasn't smooth and clean, and felt like you were always kind of wrestling control from the game in order to do it properly sometimes. Um, I think that the thing where it's like the boss is kind of artificially kept. It's like the way the game forces you to break the eggs is that you just literally can't kill the boss. Like the boss's
Yeah.
health will just not fall below a certain point, and just, like I think that was kind of dumb. Um, but I mean, I don't know. Like healing it was fun. it's interesting that this is the one boss. It's like from this point out, because Broodkeeper and then Razageth are the bosses where the developers just kind of said, "Oh, we need to make the tanks take damage. We forgot about that with the rest of the raid." And like Broodkeeper is like
Oh,
smacks
she
the
fucks.
shit out of your tank.
She
Like
fucks.
we were just completely unprepared for the ramp up in how much damage the tank was going to be taking. And I think we were running, our tank was a bear at the time, and like was having no problem, was actually backup tank. We were just short a tank and was having no problem with the rest of the raid at all. And then we got to this thing, we're like, oh fuck, that's not gonna work. We're gonna have to figure something else out. So that
Mhm.
was a weird spike in difficulty that we just didn't anticipate, which I think weakened the fight in my eyes a little bit. It was overall, like, I thought the final phase was fun to heal, like when you break all the eggs and you push into the burn phase, and like as a healer, because you're usually pretty low on mana by that point, and like you're just having to heal a shitload of, there's a lot of overlapping damage events that just you lose your mind. So it's fun to push up those health bars really quickly. But
I I also have to say, and this is gonna be the first time I brought it up. We've talked about a couple bosses already where this is true. A boss where you don't lust on pole fucking sucks. Like this boss, you didn't lust until she was at like 20%.
yeah, yeah.
It was so long that you went without lust. It
Mm-hmm.
just sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, like for a final boss, I can see not lusting on pole, but like for the majority of bosses, like lusting on pole is so much more fun than
Mm-hmm.
lusting at the end of the fight. But so Raz,
Ugh.
man, I feel like we have very different opinions on this boss.
All right, you go first. You go first.
Okay, well, so Raz phase 1 was fine. Fine with Raz phase 1, didn't have any problems with that. Raz intermission 1 should have been removed from the fucking game. I hated that intermission, but I liked it more than the second intermission. So if we've got to pick one, intermission 1 is the one I would pick to stay. And then phase 2 was awesome. Phase 2 was like it was just phase 1 but better. And then you get intermission 2. And man, I don't know what it is about this intermission, but like it killed the entire fucking fight for me because it was insanely annoying. It was hard if you didn't get everybody, like if anybody was dead, this intermission was kind of rough. And then on top of that, like uh, the consequence of fucking it up was you're just screwed. Like one of the ads heals so much and now you're just screwed. So I don't know, man. The intermission 2 could do without that. I think it ruined the entire boss fight for me. And phase 3 was chaotic. But I think that there was a lot of kind of thought that needed to go into how you did phase 3. So I didn't have a problem with phase 3. It it played into the whole like the platform shrinking and you're running out of time aspect again. But it had this annoying like get pulled to your tank every so often mechanic, or whoever, it's not the tank, it's whoever gets targeted with the ability. But yeah, I don't know, I did not like Raz really, but that was in part because it was, I'd have to check this, the longest, is it the longest final boss of the expansion? I think she is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, easily. Yeah,
And
this is a two lust fight.
yeah, but progging on a boss that is that long is just not fun. Like I think back to Sylvanas in Shadowlands, and it's just like, man, you fuck up on the last phase of Sylvanas, and you're like, well, now we got to go do the whole bullshit to get here again, and it's like that's gonna take us 10 minutes. So we just lost 10 fucking minutes because somebody didn't clear their stacks, and I kind of felt the same way about Raz. We just lost 10 minutes because somebody didn't want to go stand in the right spot to get us pulled in the right direction, or our tank didn't press a cooldown and they nuked the whole raid. Like, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with the boss. I liked phase 1 and 2. If I had to pick an intermission, I'd pick intermission 1, and then the rest of it could just, I could take it or leave it.
I love this fucking fight. I love it. This is a great fucking fight. This is a perfect final boss fight of a raid. This is awesome. I love this fight so much. I love just about everything about it. The only thing I will definitely agree with you on is it has one too many intermissions. I think the second intermission cut that out of the game, transition right from phase 2 into phase 3. I think that would be totally fine. I hate that intermission. I think not only is it too many intermissions, I think that is just a bad intermission. I don't mind the first intermission quite as much as you do. It's easy enough to where it's just kind of fine, and I kind of like having to move across the platform, killing the ads while also constantly watching as Razageth flies over. But yeah, the ads that you need to like root in the middle and the intermission too, that's just not fun. I did not like that at all. Um, but basically everything else about this fight I love. Phase 1 is awesome. I love the pushback mechanic and using the storm patches that you have to lay down. I don't
Mhm.
mind the orbs as much. I thought I was going to dread the orbs, but like it's pretty easy to handle with a little coordination. It
Oh,
also
so many
gives,
classes have AoE CC at this point.
yeah, and it's just fun as like a healer that like I have something to do in the fight other than heal. Like at times, like
Mhm.
this is I can use my utility to help. Um the phase 2, yeah, was great. I mean the stack charges and burn the shield part was awesome as a healer. Like this is going to be huge damage. You just get to go ham. I thought the getting pushed back mechanic was a lot of fun too, because that required coordination and planning of how we're going to handle that. I didn't like the big AoE slow thing that you need to drag out.
Oh
um,
yeah.
I didn't mind it. I just think it's like some classes can just handle that so much easier than other classes can, and so like you're kind of playing luck of the draw on who you're going to get who that's going to land on. If it's class that like can easily and quickly move out of the raid with the circle, no problem. But if it's not, it's kind of a pain in the butt. But I liked that mechanic on the third phase a lot, because that's like when you're running out of room and the person who gets targeted with that is just like, okay, you have to go stand in the shit and die now. That's how we're gonna handle this. I thought that was fun. I think it's a great fight. You're right. It's a little long. I think cutting that intermission out would help that a little bit. But man, I had so much fun with this, and it was tough for us to prog. This was the point in our guild when we realized that the vast majority of our raiders were not using personals or health stones or pots, and we had to scream at them constantly that during the tempest wind it's doing a lot of damage. Everyone's getting pushed back, so we can't bomb as much healing on you, and we're also saving our healing cooldowns for the big burn phase, so you need to use that shit. And I just like I have horror stories of just screaming hellstones, pots, personals, and just watching people die because they're not using them. But that's not a design problem. That's a R Raiders problem.
Yeah, yeah. But ultimately, I don't think Razageth was the worst boss of the expansion. So I will say that much.
Yeah,
I Razageth doesn't get an F, but I definitely did not love that fight.
A+, A fucking plus.
Well, we're on to Avarice next, and I don't think we're gonna have a ton of good things to say about this
Oh,
raid,
here we go.
unfortunately.
Here we go. I
I
I will say, watching this raid, like when they first announced it, and seeing the bosses and seeing the aesthetic of the raid, I was hyped. I was
yeah.
excited for this raid. I will say the one thing I was like is like, who's Sarkareth? This is the final boss. I don't know who this guy is. Who is this? This shows how much I pay attention to the story quests as I'm leveling. I have no idea who the fuck this guy is. This is our final boss. Who? Um, that wasn't great, but everything else I was pumped about. I thought this place looks cool. The Shadow Flame aesthetic is really, really cool. Um, I thought it was going to be really great, and it wasn't. It wasn't.
I loved the visuals in the raid. The
Mhm.
visuals were amazing, and like the fact that we were in Avarice, like Nefarian's workshop, like I don't know, man, it was amazing. It was like
I have no emotional attachment to the idea of being in Nefarian's workshop. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
it was cool. And then the boss is just I can't think of a single boss in the raid that I was like, yeah, dude, that boss was pretty cool.
I can think of
Like
one.
Magmarax was like probably my favorite boss of the raid,
That's
and it
a
was
wild thing to
literally
say.
just like a fucking stand there and hit the boss. Like quite literally the way to do this boss at the end of it was just stand there and don't fucking move.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Starting off though, I don't remember the name of the first boss, but
Kazara.
Kazara. Yeah, that boss was. I thought that boss was fine. Like as an intro boss, it was fine. I have less complaining to do about that boss. The mechanics about it weren't overly annoying, and they were easy enough to deal with. Um, and I like the fact that like as you're killing her, bits of her armor are falling off, and like that aesthetic was pretty cool. So honestly, of the bosses, this is probably up there for one of my favorites from the raid, and it's kind of sad because it's the first boss.
Do you like this better than Aranog as a first boss?
Uh, yeah, actually, I think I do.
Yeah, I think I do too. Um, I like this boss. I always parsed really high on this boss for whatever reason, so that makes me like it. So my healing parses were always in the 90s plus on this boss. So I think I got like a 98 on one of them. I was like, hell yeah, I'm good at this game. Um, just goes to show you people were
So
probably taking way too much additional damage because they weren't doing the mechanics right.
the next boss, which you might have to remind me of the name of this again, but is the Fire and Shadow guy. What
That
was the
is
name of the
the
fight?
amalgamation chamber.
Yeah, Amalgamation Chamber. This was another split your raid in half, and one does one thing and the other does another, and then you come together and you fight this thing at the end. Um, I just felt like the way in which they handled the like needing to split your raid in this was just not the right way to do it. It felt kind of clunky. Um, and like transitioning the bosses was like you wanted to do it when your stacks were a little higher, but you had to do it after they did their like I'm gonna call it their ultimate ability, their like special ability or
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it. Um, and that was probably too soon as far
Yeah.
as like when you actually wanted to, based on how much damage you were taking and everything like that. But I don't for heroic, I mean, I think you still split them. I don't actually know, but eventually in normal and LFR, you just stack them together and zerg the fuck out of it, and
You
then
could do that
fight
by
the
the end of
final part.
heroic as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if there's a damage reduction or something in heroic on it,
There
but
might be, but it's not enough. Um,
gotcha.
yeah, I mean, I have very little memory of this boss. I think it fell over pretty quickly for us. It's just not that tricky. I agree. Like the thing with the splitting the raid and then having to switch sides is a fun idea. I think ultimately, like needing people to like run the length of the room is not fun. I guess you could do it one
Well,
of two ways, right? You could switch the bosses or you could switch the raid, right?
ideally you switch the bosses,
Yeah.
but I don't. I think we might have been having tank issues or something like that, but
That I
we
mean,
moved
you will
our
notice
entire
a
raid.
common theme is that we often have tank issues. I just want to say for the record, I was not tanking in this expansion. So when I say we had tank issues, I am not saying that anything was my fault because nothing was ever.
Our tanks are gonna listen to this and be like, "Motherfucker, what?"
Yeah, but they know.
Yeah, it's not like we haven't already told them. So. um, yeah, I guess let's just move on. I don't have anything else to add for this boss. It was just kind of there.
It was the ultimate realization of that shadow flame aesthetic. Like I thought the elemental that was the mixture of the two looked cool. And that's about all I have to say about it.
Dude, okay, so we got to take a second to talk about this. Like the art team at Blizzard just like absolutely fucking kills
Oh, every
everything,
time.
man.
Yeah, every
Like
time.
just amazing. Like
Hmm.
the aesthetics in these places are so cool.
It's absolutely part of the staying power of this game. Is
Yeah.
that the art is frequently wonderful.
So the next fight was the council fight of the
Why we gotta fucking do this, man?
raid.
You don't have Blizzard. You don't have to do this.
I'm going to let you go first on this one because I feel like you have way more stronger emotions about this boss than I do.
Okay, so I mean, ultimately, this fight is fine. Um, I think the one big mechanic that I felt that was annoying was the I forget what it's called. It was a stupid dispel mechanic. I think it was called unstable essence. So basically, what happens is the boss will occasionally mark a player with a stacking debuff that will do more and more damage to them as they stack. When you remove the debuff, it jumps to another player, and he continually puts them out. So the idea is over time, these will get overwhelming because people will continue to take stacking damage. Um, they also leave a big puddle on the ground, or not a puddle, a swirly on the ground when they're dispelled. So you kind of have to be smart about it. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, let's just have shadow priests to mass dispel, or priests in general to mass dispel. It'll make it a lot easier. I just like that kind of like debuff management is not fun for me. And what happens is exactly what happened for us when we were just like, oh, this is the problem part of the fight for us. So here's what we're gonna do when the boss that does that comes out. We're going to save all our cooldowns. We're going to blow lust. And the goal of the fight and the succeeding point of the fight for us will be, can we kill him before we get more than one of these debuffs? And then we'll only have to manage one for the rest of the fight. And this is on heroic, mind you, and this is not even normal. Like you could do this on heroic to where you only get one. And so you're just like, I think it's cool that you can cheese mechanics in that way, but it means, in my opinion, it's not a very well designed mechanic. And I mean, I think it's a fun idea of being like, let's see, like the proto Drakthir, and that's what we're fighting against, is the early versions of what Nefarian was trying to make, and that's a neat idea. But I don't know, this is stupid. It's a stupid fight. I don't like it.
You forgot the biggest annoyance for me on this fight. When you dispel that thing, it's not a swirly it puts on the ground. It spawns a fucking ad
Oh my
that
god.
just deals a ton of damage.
Yeah, I forgot. I forgot that. Yeah, because a normal version it doesn't spawn an ad, but on heroic it spawns an ad. Yeah.
That was the stupidest shit ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you just want somebody to tank this debuff as long as possible, and we're getting into the realm of just RNG being the factor on how the fight goes.
Right. If you get a especially tanky DPS that gets it, it's like, okay, cool. You can just sit on that for forever and we don't have to deal with it. Yeah. And also, like anything that like mass dispel makes considerably easier, which is one mechanic, is always going to kind of be annoying to me because it's like now that's dictating comp in a way I'm not thrilled about.
The next most important or annoying part of this fight for me was in phase 3, the stupid little balls you had to bounce away from the boss because they just didn't bounce the right way 95% of the time. Like you'd walk into it and it would bounce away from you, and then you'd walk into it again and then it'd go through you. And it's like, dude, what the fuck is going on here? Like, this is supposed to be a key part of the fight. Don't let these things hit the boss or he gets a shield. And it's like, they just don't fucking work right. So it was frustrating as hell, man.
I think the one thing that I think was cool about this fight was the tank mechanic, right? It had an interesting tank mechanic, I think.
Oh yeah, where they had to like bump each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool. That was kind of a fun mix up of the usual get debuff tank swap idea. But that's it, really.
Yeah, this fight kind of sucked.
Yeah.
I don't have anything that you didn't already say that wasn't an annoyance for me.
I don't like council fights. Guess a preview for the next raid. I don't like council fights.
Bro, the council fight in the next raid's a fucking banger, though.
No, wrong.
You're a hater, man. The council fight in the next raid's a fucking banger. So I'm trying to remember, what's the boss after this? Is it the Squally Assault or whatever?
Yes. Let's just move on. We'll move on from this raid or from this boss as quickly as everyone did in progging this boss.
I do remember, I do find it extremely funny on how this boss is handled now. Like, I don't know if you've done the raid since it's became Awakened, but you literally just like, you blow Lust at the beginning and try to fucking zerg him as low as you possibly can. And then you just send all your DPS to one side and push him to phase 2.
Yeah.
Like, ignoring everything else that happens in the fight. And then you just kill all the ads with him at the end.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, this is one of those things where I'm like, sometimes I feel bad for the developers because they come up with a fun concept and then it's just actually not fun at all. Like I remember reading about this fight and the idea that like there are these ads that are climbing up the wall, and like a key mechanic of this fight is you've got to like pick up a rock and like throw the rock at the ad, and it'll make it fall before it gets to the top, and you don't have to deal with it. Like that sounds cool. It does. It's just in actual like practicality of doing the beat to beat moments of the fight, it's not fun actually. It's
Yeah.
and the fight is so easy that there's nothing. I mean, the only part of the fight I actually like is phase 2, when you have to kind of split the raid. But again, it's too easy. You have to split the raid and like soak the door. I thought that was fun. But that's it, and it just falls over. I can't imagine someone taking more than 5 minutes to proc on this fight.
The next boss is one that is a rare gem from this raid. I actually kind of liked this boss a little bit. There was some annoying parts about it, in the fact that like the soak mechanic that needed to happen was in melee, and so if you're a range player, like having to go into melee and then run out of melee so that you're ready for the other mechanics was kind of weird. But it's a Rashok. And I do like the whole needing to drop things on the edge of the room that are gonna then like shoot shit out,
Mhm.
and you can't overlap them. Like I actually kind of liked that mechanic. Um, I think ultimately what happened and what kind of killed this boss for us, um, maybe it was the tanks at the time. I don't know. I actually don't know why this boss is so kind of sour, and I don't remember it super fondly, because mechanics wise, I kind of liked the fight.
Here's what I think it is personally. I think mechanically this fight is actually really simple. You get the swirlies on you, you take it to a corner of the room, the boss needs to be dragged into the center when it starts doing that thing, and you go into the burn phase, which is very fun. You stack when you stack. I mean, there's nothing like particularly complicated about this fight mechanics wise, and yet we died to it more than we should have.
Mhm.
Like this is essentially the closest thing we have in modern WoW to like the patchwork fight of the raid. It's one target. It's mostly just single target burst as much as you can. It's a DPS race fight in a lot of ways. Um, and we struggled with it for a long time. The tank mechanic of this one is one of those ones where he casts a sequence of 3 abilities, and if you get hit by the same ability twice, you die. So the off tank needs to taunt, but you have to be paying attention and know when to taunt. Sometimes you have to taunt after the first ability. Sometimes you have to taunt after the second ability. It just depends. And our tanks, the theme here, once again, our tanks struggle with that, so a thing that seems very very easy and simple mechanically that you struggle with tends to be frustrating, and I think that's where we're at. I don't think it took us that long to kill this, honestly.
No.
But the all the deaths we had on it were just like this. We should be killing this. Like, there's no reason not to be killing this at this point. And so
Yeah.
that's probably that would be my guess as to why you have this negative feeling. Because I liked this fight a whole lot. I think this is a really fun fight to heal. That was cool.
Yeah. Uh, I I liked the mechanics of the fight. I liked doing the boss. It just, like I said, I had this weird, I don't have this fondness when I think of this boss. I was just like, I mean, it was okay.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
then I think the individual mechanics, and I was like, why didn't I like this more? So, yeah, I think you're onto something though. That's probably it. I felt like we spent too much time on this relative to what we should be.
Yeah.
So,
And everyone that progged this raid on Mythic absolutely loved this fight. This was their favorite fight of the raid, which I think is really interesting because it's one of those ones where like I feel like I'm missing something. That thing we talked about at the very beginning, like because I'm listening to these people talk about like how awesome this is on Mythic, and I'm just like I'm not seeing this, y'all. Like why exactly? And I just feel like, oh, it's because I'm missing the key thing that unlocks the fight as this brilliant moment of game design.
yeah. So I guess to move on, the next boss is the next two. Well, I guess not the next two bosses, because there's just another patchwork boss after this one. But
Hmm.
this boss, and then uh not the next boss, but the boss after, are going to be two that we have not so great opinions on, mainly because of how our raid handled it. So
Hmm.
Zaskarn is this boss. And
Mm-hmm.
everything about this boss was like, it was okay. The mechanics were okay. The most annoying thing was like having to go click on the bots and then disable traps. Like, I could have done without that mechanic.
Yeah.
Like, if it just like randomly gave somebody the buff that they could go disable the trap, or it was like something you walked over and then you picked it up, you could go disable the trap. But the fact that you had to like click on the bot and then you had to target the trap and then you had to click your extra action button, like it was just way too much to be able to like actually do the mechanic. I feel like they should have simplified that a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but the big part of this fight was it was a dance, uh, in the most part. Uh, and then there was the tank mechanic, which was just running over these balls that got dropped on the ground. Um, yeah, our tanks did not handle this very well at all. We spent a lot of time on this boss, trying to make sure that the tanks were doing this correctly. To the point where I was playing Paladin at the time, and I'd just go bubble and pop a couple of the fucking
Hell,
bombs.
man, I went bare form and ate a bomb because it was about to explode, and I was like, "No one's gonna get this fucking bomb. I'm gonna burn bark, go bare form, and run over this bomb and hope I survive." Um, yeah, I think this is like a great philosophical question about like fight design and stuff. It's like how much of you hating a particular fight is because the design of this particular fight just so happens to hit your raid group in every spot that you're weak. Like,
Mhm.
is this a bad designed fight, or did this just expose every little piece of our weakness as a group? I think it's honestly a little bit of both. I do think that like we were like especially ill prepared for how to damage that, like the places in which we were not as strong as a group were the places in which we really required the most help. um
Yeah.
and that but also I do think it's kind of a clunky fight. Like I agree with you, it's a dance, but it's like not, if it's a dance, it's not a well choreographed dance. It's a very
Mhm.
erratic dance. And ultimately like didn't enjoy it. I found it frustrating. Like it's interesting because I also like pumped on this boss. Like my healer parsers were really good on this boss, and again it's because people were doing things wrong. The amount of people that were like getting in the fire and taking debuffs that we had to deal with was just really annoying. But I did not enjoy it as much as I did on Kazara.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I don't like this one. I think this is my least favorite fight in the raid for sure.
I do want to take this second to like talk about this because I don't feel like WoW does these bosses very frequently,
Hmm.
but like the concept of a dance boss is super cool to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that Final Fantasy 14 does incredibly well. Uh, so I would like to see him do more things like that, where like just watching a group that coordinated knows what's going on versus a group that doesn't, like the amount of difference that that makes. Like I kind of wish WoW would do some more of those bosses personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think WoW really likes their random factor, and I think one thing about the dance, like this dance in this fight is very randomized. Like it's, you don't know where the traps are going. You can kind of control some of the traps, but not all of the where all the traps are going to go down. um you don't know which side the fire breath's going to come out on. You don't know exactly where the bombs are going to be placed. Like, so there's a lot of randomness in it. And like I think, which is like, it's not to say that the Final Fantasy 14 fights don't have randomness built into them. Like they do, in that like, okay, now we're gonna do this mechanic, and how you have to resolve it will change each time you pull
Hmm.
it, but the way you resolve it will essentially be the same. It's just who is responsible for what slightly changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is room for them to make a fight that is kind of playing in that Final Fantasy realm a little bit more, and I think it would be interesting. I think this was an attempt at that, not successful.
So the next boss is Magmarax, and this is what I would say is the 100% patchwork boss of the raid.
That's
I
fair.
mean, it is quite literally you stand there stacked as a raid and hit the boss. Like there's nothing else to it.
The biggest problem with this boss is that it's the third, not the penultimate, but the penultimate. It's the It's near the end of the raid where it's in the back half of the raid. There's only 2 bosses after it. It just feels out of
Out of place.
place. Yeah.
It's definitely a step down in difficulty from Ziskarn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ziskarn, I wouldn't say is a hard boss.
This, I mean, it feels like a first raid boss. Like it feels like this would be the first you zone in and you fight Magmarax.
Yeah. So I don't have a lot to add for Magmarax.
Yeah. I don't have
Like
anything to say
I
about
shit
this.
you not. Like for anybody who's listening who hasn't done this boss, like you literally you stack together, you get a mechanic that I think they intended for you to run out, and then people came and like soaked on it afterwards with you. But the way that you did this, honestly, after like week 2, when
Yeah.
people had enough health to live it, was you just like you all stack together, all of the shit goes under you, you all soak it together, nobody's getting too many of the debuffs, and it's just like that's the fight.
Yeah.
Then you get knocked back and you go stack up again. Like it's just it's quite literally stand there and hit the boss.
It is.
So there's not a ton to add.
It is comically funny how quickly the puddle shrinks when the entire raid is stacked up on it. It's so funny to watch. It's like, whoop, oh, it's gone.
The next boss is one that we had struggles with again.
It's because it's a stupid fight. I hate this fight.
It sucks because like I wanted to like this fight.
Yeah.
It seemed so cool, but yeah, the whole wall mechanic I thought was dumb.
I thought it was gonna be
And
cool. I thought like
the
it seemed like a cool idea. Like it's a fun the tank buster or the tank swap mechanic being your soul is separated from your body and goes flying through a wall. That's really cool. It sucked though. Yeah, this fight sucks.
yeah, I also feel like the last phase of the fight was one a little too chaotic and two honestly probably a little too short. You
Yeah.
really only get like 2 casts of the thing where you have to go stand in the pools for the most part, and
Yeah.
like that's it, and then the fight's over.
Yeah. Here's what I think happened with this fight. I think very late into the PTR cycle, this boss had a call feature that is reminiscent of what is the Blackwing Layer boss?
Eltharion?
It's not
No.
Neltharion in Blackwing Layer, is it? No, it's I don't know. I didn't play Classic, okay? I didn't play this game.
Oh, you did.
I mean, I played it. I didn't. Nefarian. You know the guy we're literally fighting in Kata
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Nefarian's big ability in that was a class call ability in which he would randomly pick one of the classes in your raid and then he would like do a thing to the raid based on that call. And in the design of this boss through not I don't know if it even got into testing, but like when you read it in the data mine stuff and you read it in the encounter journal and all that stuff, had a class call ability where he would do the same thing as Nefarian did. He would pick a random person in your raid and he would do an effect on the raid based on what class that person was. And I really feel like a lot of the fight was designed around that thing existing. And then at some point in development or testing or what have you, they kind of made the decision that this isn't going to work, that in modern World of Warcraft, like the result of that would just be either stupid class stacking or it was just too much of a challenge to balance the various class calls in a way that felt fair. Which, I mean, to be honest, like everything I've read about the Nefarian class calls in Classic, it was like some of them were like super easy, and some of them, sorry, you're just fucked.
The warrior one.
Yeah. Um, and so they basically ripped that whole feature out of the fight, and it feels like they never really found something to put back in its place. So it's one of those things where I get the feeling that it feels like half of a fight, and then I look at the mythic mechanics and I'm like, oh, the only real mythic mechanic is the bane of everyone's existence private aura thing. I forget what it was even called, like the heart, where you have to very very quickly place a giant point blank AoE to not hit other people.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it just I think it's a bad fight. I really do. It's disappointing because I was really jazzed about it, and like the idea of having to break rocks in a controlled manner to weave through the maze of rocks that the boss is putting up. I think that's all really cool. But it just isn't fun. I mean, for the majority of the fight, you're fighting one of these three ads, which is not fun. I don't like the mechanic where someone has to hit it. Someone that's been targeted has to like hit it to make it targetable. I don't like the fact that people like standing there if they're targeted with this random thing could be hurting people around them. And I don't like that stuff.
Dude, the best part about this boss was that you could kill your friends. That was the best part about this
See,
boss.
this is once again DPS mind in play here.
But I share pretty much all your same sentiment on this boss. I think that for the most part, the biggest drawback for this boss fight was it just didn't. I don't know. It didn't live up to the hype. I
Yeah.
guess
Yep.
is the best way to put it.
It's
for
the
me.
penultimate boss. Like the penultimate boss should be penultimate.
Yeah.
It should be fun. It should be awesome. It should be epic. Not quite as epic as the final boss, but close. And especially when it's like when it's Neltharion, right? It's a fucking aspect of Earth himself that we're getting to fight against. And
Yeah.
yeah. Nah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a ton more to add that hasn't already been said. It's just the main thing for me was like the main DPS mechanic was kind of like a knockback, but it was a knockback in a line. So you just took it to the outer wall and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there really wasn't much to do here. And then other than that, it was don't stand in the fire that he throws on the ground and don't
Yep.
stand in the swirlies that he throws on. So I don't know. It was kind of, again, it was another one of these kind of like, it felt like a nothing burger of a fight once you actually did it. And it's kind of sad.
Yep. Agree.
Sargarath. I don't like this boss. I think this is my least favorite boss of the expansion. And it sucks because it has some really cool moments. Like this is the only boss I think I've ever done where like I was using a defense again, I was playing Paladin. So I was using Shield of Vengeance in my opener. Like pre-pull I was popping Shield of Vengeance because this boss goes fucking 0 to 100 like immediately. Your rate is just like dying. And like that was awesome. Phase 1 of the fight for the most part I think was okay. The range mechanic was really fucking annoying. uh but outside of that I think phase 1 was okay. I played melee, so maybe you can talk more about the range mechanic because I just ignored it. Y'all bitched about it constantly, but I just ignored it.
The range mechanic, I like this fight. I think it is my least favorite of the three end bosses, but I think those are more of a reflection of how good I think the other two were,
True.
and less about how bad this one is. The first phase is the best phase, which is a weird. It's a weird. I think that's the fight's biggest problem. Is the first phase is the best phase. It is like a 0 to 100 healer check. Like this is one of the first bosses that I like would need like a 45-second setup in my healing. Like I remember like to be able to get tree form, because you know you use Swift Men twice and you get a stack. There's a talent in the resto tree where you get every time you use Swift Men you get a stack of an ability. When you hit the third stack you go tree form for a few seconds. And so I would literally like get 2 stacks prepped and then it resets when you go into combat, but I would literally like time it to where on 1 I would hit my third Swiftmen, turn into a tree right before combat, just so I could like immediately start blasting because the damage comes right away. That was a lot of fun getting to kind of min max that out. And I didn't mind the ranged mechanics. I didn't mind the lava pool placement stuff. Yeah, we struggled with it as a group because people weren't standing in the right place sometimes, but that's the type of thing where like you feel like you as a team are in control of how difficult the boss is, and if you're doing it right you're making things easy for you, and I liked that. No, I
You
mean,
also had a melee DPS that liked to bait breaths towards you guys too.
dude,
So
yeah, it didn't help. It didn't help.
So I guess what did you think of? I thought the intermission and the going down and then getting a bunch of haste part was really cool.
It's fun. It's
Um,
fun. Yeah.
So I thought that part was good, and I liked that you could do it multiple times throughout the fight, kind of at your own whim.
Hmm.
Sometimes it was forced upon you if you got hit by something or
Yeah.
whatever, but uh, I liked that you could kind of make that decision. Um, I think phase two was the worst, potentially the worst part of the fight. Um, it just kind of felt like, I don't know, it just felt weird. Like it was like an ad phase, but not really an ad phase. And then you had
Yeah.
like weird baiting that you had to do. And then in heroic, you had to like pull the ads through shit and get this like deep or buff off of them before you could kill them. And I don't know, it felt weird. Was not a fan.
Yeah. I like when fights allow you to bait stuff in this way where like you can clearly tell when someone's good at the fight, when a team is good at the fight because they're doing a very good job baiting, and like that's one of the progression moments that you as a team have. It's like, oh look, we've really improved how we're laying the pools down that the ads need to go through, and also laying the thing that spawns the ads. Like we're doing a very very good job at this actually. um I thought that was cool. The biggest problem with phase two is you go through this phase one that is just like damage, 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 nonstop. And then like the end of that phase is just like one final fuck you on damage. Is like, hope you saved a cooldown, motherfucker. And like that phase ends and you go into phase two. And as a healer, you're just like, nothing's happening. Nobody's taking any damage at all. Like there's no damage in there's like there's a little bit. And so you're just kind of sitting there. It's like, okay, I guess I'll regen mana. I guess. And yeah, it's such a weird experience because you go from like literally being seconds away from anyone dying or the party wiping because you were slow on a heal to you just you don't matter anymore. You just don't matter to the fight. And that's a weird feeling, and it's weird for it to happen in that order. Like you would assume in a fight things would ramp up, not ramp down and then up again. It's this really weird cadence. I guess it's a trade-off, right? Because like I just spoke glowingly about the fact that the fight starts at 100 immediately, but like you can't actually maintain that for a whole fight. Like you can't.
Yep.
So this is the trade-off of that design thing. They were like, yeah, the cool thing about this fight is the damage is going to come out right away. And it's like, okay, well, we have to stop that at some point. And the result is the phase two of this fight where you're just like, oh, okay, I guess.
So that brings us to phase three. And I think phase two was the actual worst part of the fight, in my opinion. Um, but I personally didn't like phase three. I liked I liked the thought of it and everything about it. I think the thing that I disliked the most was the tank mechanic. Um, I like, not just because like we struggled with it, but like the fact that if you were in front of the boss, it can get put on DPS and it isn't just like a targeted hit on a tank. I think that that is what I hated the most about it, is because like phase three is fucking chaotic. Like you're getting knocked around by people who you have to dispel, and then you knock the party into a specific spot, and then you have to like kill ads while also getting out of swirlies, but you also have to get out of the giant circle that Zarkra spawns. And sometimes you have to hide behind these pillars and
Yeah,
like,
there's a knockback you have to control.
mhm.
It's an intense phase for sure.
And all of that on top of the fucking tank mechanic as a boss frontal just like sucks, because like I think in a more coordinated group or higher skill level, like people will realize that they get the tank debuff and they'll go down and it's not that big of a deal. But like when you're just an AOTC guild, the majority of the people who aren't used to dealing with a mechanic aren't going to be looking out for it. So if they get hit with the tank debuff, they don't know to look and see that they have the tank debuff and to go down with it whenever
Yeah.
it's about to expire. So I think that if they made the tank debuff just a targeted on a specific person thing, it would have been a lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, we also struggled with our tanks not like anything in this expansion that was like the amount of unmitigated damage will be shared amongst your raid members was like fuck, we're in trouble. Um, but yeah, I agree with that. I think the thing about phase 3 is I'm still even now after we've killed the boss many times not confident that I understand the best strategy for how to deal with that phase. It's just there's so much going on. I mean, I think we got very good at the one thing you have to get good at is the knockback dispel. You have to get very good at that because if you don't, you'll die. And so we got good at that. But the placement of the pillars, the hiding behind the pillars, the needing to soak the thing, like we just never got good at that, and we just kind of brute forced our way through it. Which, like, I guess it's is it good that we could just brute force our way through that? I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing.
I mean, it
From
was
like,
good for us getting AOTC.
yeah, it was good for us getting the hell out of that raid, but was it good from a design perspective? I guess not.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should probably jump into a mirror
Yeah,
Drasilla
in the
because I
interest
feel like
of
we've been,
time, in the interest of
yeah, we've
time, yeah.
been talking about this a lot.
It
So
makes me sad because this is the best raid in the expansion, and we're gonna have to rush through it a little bit here.
it is the best raid of the expansion to the point where I can think of bosses that I don't like because they were annoying, but dude, I feel like every boss in this raid like had a goal and achieved the goal
There,
very well.
there's only 2 fights in this raid I just do not like at all, and they're for very distinct reasons. And I still think they're better than most of the bosses in Aberrus. So
Yeah. So the first boss in the raid is Gnarl Root. Big old tree boy,
banger,
isn't it?
banger. Yep, great first
Yeah.
boss. Great first boss.
I do like
Prototype of how to do a first boss correctly.
I do like the changes that they made from normal to heroic. This is one of the few times that I'll talk about this where like I think that the way that they handled the heroic like mechanic in normal is a good way to handle that because
Yeah,
it isn't essentially telling people like, oh, here's just a new mechanic that you have to deal with. It's just you're learning the first half of it and then or the second half of it and you get thrown the first half when you go to heroic. So I feel like they did a super good job with that.
so refresh my memory. You don't, there's not a swirly on the ground, right? You just get the
Yeah, normal it
debuff.
just puts the debuff on
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
So in heroic you have to soak and then you get the debuff and it only lasts for so long. But in normal it's like you burn 3 things and the debuff goes away and then it reapplies it to you or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's cool because like you just, everyone has a role. You soak the circles and then burn the tree, and like I don't know, like just like the, speaking of visuals, like just the visuals of the tree pieces burning, like I think is really satisfying and cool. Like it all works very well. It like,
Also, any boss with a damage amp is a fucking banger
yeah,
boss.
yep, agree. And I'm not even a
So
DPS player, and I agree.
so Naru, awesome,
Best first
great
boss,
boss.
officially
Yeah,
declared best first boss of Dragonflight.
I agree. I agree. The next one, I can't remember her name. Oh, what was her name?
It's Igira the
Gira.
Cruel.
Yeah. I actually really like this boss, and I like that you have the ability to decide how you want to complete it.
I do like that. I agree with you. I think this is a boring fight that goes on way too long. This boss feels
That's fair.
so long. Um,
It's another boss that you just kind of like cheese one of the main mechanics about it too,
yep,
where you just
yep.
like all stack together and take the damage hit and then nuke everything down at the same
hmm
time. So
it feels like I think the biggest problem with it is the weapon switch mechanic where you have to soak to make her pick up the weapon. Like it feels like the amount of time between each one of those events is like way too long, where there was multiple
mhm.
times we were progging it. I'm like, all right, and it's now time for her to soak the other weapon. And then I look at my timer and it's like a minute away and I'm like, what the fuck? What are we gonna do for a minute? Yeah, it's just, yeah. I think it's a fun idea, but yeah, this is one of the two that I just did not like.
Yeah, I actually don't dislike the boss, but I do agree that it was just it was one of the things like in Everest. It was just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't something that I was dreading doing every week,
Yeah.
but it was just kind of there. What way you want to go next?
Let's go fire first.
Fire. Okay, so the worm. What was his name?
Volcaros.
Volcaros. Yeah. Uh, I think this fight is fucking awesome.
I love this fight. I love
I
this
like
fight.
this fight a lot. Like, it's super simple. It's
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
stupidly simple, but man, it was just like the fact that like there are large damage events, there's soaks, and there's like don't stand with people, but also it's just a hit the boss the whole time. Like, I don't know, there was something about this fight that just it felt awesome. It was a fun boss.
Yeah, and any fight that allows me to watch as one of my raid members get squashed by a giant worm is just absolutely delightful. I'm just like, should I tell him about the giant shadow that's hovering over his character right now? Nah.
I played
Um,
Evoker during this raid and vividly remember killing people with that tail slam. So
yeah, I mean, it has everything. Like it has the split up mechanics where you kind of get to take your own team, and it has the running out of room mechanic. Although the damage check on it is so simple that I don't think we ever got close to running out of room, like ever, even on our
Mhm.
first kill. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a better version of Taros in a lot of ways. I think.
I agree.
Yeah, I like this fight a lot.
And then we got Larry. What do you think of Larry?
So as a healer, I had a lot of jobs in this fight, and I think this is one of the few fights in the history of this game where I will say that needing to heal NPCs did not bother me. Um, there's 3 NPCs, you have to heal them, then they do things. You also like I love getting to do like the firefighting mechanic where you have to control the spread of the fire. Um, I think the second phase is intense and fun when you're doing it correctly. I just think this is a fun fight. The only part of it I don't like is I didn't like the seed that you need to everyone needs to stand in part. I didn't like
Yeah.
that. Um, but like the tank mechanic where he's gonna like charge at the tank and do damage based on how close he was to the tank when he started the charge. That's fun. That's really cool. I liked that. There's lots of damage to heal. This is one of the a few fights that I really struggled for mana in Prague on. Like I felt like I was always running out of mana, and I think part of that is because you're just like really incentivized to bomb the shit out of the um ads as quickly as possible with healing, and that is like a real quick way as a resto druid to drain your mana.
Yeah.
But man, good fight. I liked it.
What did you think of the phase 2 tank mechanic? The frontal health absorb whatever the fuck mechanic where they got the debuff on them and had to stack with people.
I think it's fun, but I also think it's one of those things that our group was especially bad at.
Yeah.
No, it
Yeah.
feels like no one ever understood the what we were actually supposed to do there, and it caused wipes for no reason.
Yeah, I do think that with this boss, everything about what you just said is it hits a nail on the head. I also like so Dragonflight did this a couple of times where there's like a you have to hide mechanic, but the thing you have to hide behind doesn't actually break line of sight, so you
Hmm.
can still do like your DPS and
Yes.
everything else.
Yes.
Like that is so good, and they do this in Halls of Infusion too. We'll talk about that probably next week. So that I liked that a lot. I like that you have this thing you have to hide behind, but it doesn't just mean that you're standing there doing nothing, waiting for the boss mechanic to go off.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so then I guess we're gonna go to your next boss you didn't like very much, huh? The council. It makes me really sad you don't like this council fight.
This is my favorite of the expansions council fights. But when I tell you that's a low bar, we're playing Limbo over here. No, I can't believe you like this fight. I can't believe you like. What is it about this fight that you like?
Well, during Prague, nothing. But when I came back in on my druid, everything. This fight, like, it has the perfect amount of targets for a druid at
Oh
the
my
time.
god, here
You
was
could
the
keep
fucking DPS
you can
bullshit.
keep
I knew
Stellar
it.
Flare up on all 3. You can keep both of your other dots, Moonfire and Starfire, up on all 3, and then you just spam fucking Starfall constantly. Man, this boss fucking ruled.
I should have known. I should have known. Why didn't I predict this?
I so like real talk though. Can we just say the duck mechanic is both amazing and extremely fucking frustrating at the same time
Yeah.
because getting turned into a duck in the middle of something that you're doing, be it cooldowns or ramping for healing or whatever, is extremely fucking annoying.
Hmm.
But the fact that you can do the mechanic correctly and go eat the little pools on the ground and then turn back, or you can be the cheeky little guy who goes and unducks on your resto druid so that you can laugh at him while he bitches and complains about the fact that he got turned into a duck again is amazing.
Yeah, you're right. It's so good.
I don't know. I really like this boss. I like how they interact with each other. I will say that is the one thing that I did like about this council fight a lot is like you had to use one boss's mechanics to handle the other bosses
Yeah, that's
like
fun.
ultimate mechanic.
I hate the bear's frontal cone. That's like
Oh, true.
I
Dude,
feel
that
like
part was fucking stupid.
I feel like without that, I find this boss so much less annoying. It's a council fight in which you basically cannot stack all three bosses on top of each other. That's why you loved it so much as a balanced druid because you're a degenerate. Um, but then you're constantly having to move around. You got the ducks going on, like there's just constant movement, and then just like, oh, by the way, also there's going to be this big frontal that the boss is doing, and we lost so many attempts to people inadvertently or just stupidly standing in front of the boss. But like, it's hard to blame them because like when you're running around and trying to do so much stuff, like yeah, I just didn't like that at all.
I will say to give our tanks some credit, this is a boss where one of our tanks like really stepped up and was like, "Okay, these people need to be in now. These
Yeah.
people need to move. Tank frontal's happening. Don't
Hmm.
be on me."
Yeah,
Like, yeah, he stepped up real big on this boss.
for sure. Yeah.
So the next boss, I don't know. I actually don't know what the like popular opinion is on this boss. I think that this boss, when I initially was doing it on Prague, I thought that this was the weakest boss in the raid, in my opinion. But I've revisited it a few times now, and I actually kind of really fuck with this boss. Like, I actually like Nimue a lot. I think it's a lot of fun.
Nimue is a great. It's a extremely well designed fight that was extremely frustrating to prog on. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's mostly because our fucking group of morons who I love just wouldn't stack in the goddamn flowers. Like sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night screaming, "Get on the flowers!" because no one would get on the damn flowers. It was like the closest I've seen our group to like getting audibly angry with each other was when we were wiping on this boss because nobody was soaking the goddamn flowers. Um,
Yeah.
but like it's a fun fight. Like you're absolutely right that coming back and doing this thing on farm when everyone understands their role and what they're supposed to do and is doing it right, like it's fun. I mean, like
Mhm.
the line mechanic and having to judge like how many lines you have the ability to run through to get your thing you have to drop in the back, and then moving over to the ad. I like as a healer, it was always really fun to like I have very distinct memories of during the ad section a flower was dropped, and so I'm standing in the flower to make it go away for the ad portion, and I know there's going to be this huge damage event right after both ads die before we transition back to the first phase. There's a lot of damage, and so I'm like watching my flower shrink, and I'm like as soon as that happens I have to sprint over there to get back in time to rip my big cooldowns. Was just very fulfilling and fun. No, this is a good boss. This is a really good boss.
Yeah. So the next boss is the first boss that I would call like a major pug killer for this raid.
Yeah.
And I again, in the same way that we were talking about the remaining bosses in this raid, like this boss fucking ruled. Like
I love this
Smolder
boss.
was
Hell
amazing.
yeah. This is such a good fight. Like it's awesome.
The again, like we said earlier with Gnarl Root, like a boss with a damage amp is just fucking amazing. It's so cool.
As long
And
as you
like
collect your fucking balls.
the other part about this fight of like I think this was one of the most interesting progression periods for our guild is learning how to handle the tank mechanic on this fight in heroic specifically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um because it isn't the same every time. And
Yeah.
so like you have to adjust. And so there were so many things about this fight that I really liked. I liked the damage amp. I liked the dance part.
Yeah.
It was annoying when I went back and did this on a paladin because you sometimes just have to walk away from the boss, or you do what I do and pop bubble and keep hitting the boss anyways because it's a damage amp phase. And why the fuck would I move away from the boss?
Mm,
Uh, but it's just I don't know. It's a great boss. What were your
great,
you
great
got
boss.
anything specific about this one?
Nothing more other than like once again it has the mechanics where you can kind of control the fire in a way to like where you, if you learn to bait it correctly and successfully, you can maximize the number of space or the amount of space you have, which maximizes the amount of time you have with the boss. And that's a thing that like is fun to see as your team is learning the fight. You are getting better and better at baiting that correctly. And watching you all get it. And I agree with you that the swapping mechanic where at the start of the phase, are you going to have to get the one where you have to stack, or are you going to get the one where you have to spread? And then knowing that the next phase you're going to have to switch that, and you can kind of pre-position for that, but you don't want to pre-position too early because you've also got the bait mechanic that you're trying to get the like it all just comes together in a really really satisfying way. Um, yeah, and the amp mechanic for damage is also an amp mechanic for healing, and that means I like it too.
I will say, I feel like the one drawback of this boss was when you picked up the orbs, they did a lot of fucking damage.
Hmm.
So if you were picking them up without a defensive while you were also taking the raid wide damage that was happening, and you picked up all your orbs right at the beginning, like I've seen that kill people multiple times.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't necessarily take that as a negative thing for the boss, but I would say if I have to pick out one thing that was annoying on this boss, that would be it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Um, all right. So now we're getting to T Swift, Tindril. So,
The world first Raider's favorite boss of all time.
dude, the mythic mechanic of this boss is so fucking cool. I don't
Yeah.
care what anybody said. Like, as annoying as it might be, the fact that you're literally slamming down to deal damage to the fucking boss is like, is so fucking cool.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's totally awesome. And like I don't know if I would have ever had the skill to defeat this on the original version of Mythic. Even the heavily nerfed version that was not fully nerfed yet is still insane. But on AOTC, this feels like a perfectly fair, challenging penultimate boss. Um, I think there were moments where the healing profile of Resto Druid makes a lot of this very difficult, but it was just a challenge. And as I learned the damage phases and how to manage those, it got much more manageable for sure. Um,
Uh, we also did not have a ton of priests in our raid. So we
yes.
had to single dispel all of the dispel mechanics for ranged.
Yep.
And if you're a melee player, you won't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But ranged get a debuff on them that's extremely annoying that they have to run out and get dispelled on. And yeah, having to do those one by one is annoying.
Yeah, we lost
The
a lot of
actual
people.
way.
We lost a lot of people dying just because the ticking of the debuff. Like
Mhm.
we were too slow on those dispels, and they were dying to the ticking debuff, which is frustrating.
Yeah, a better way to do this is to all stack and then mass dispel it.
Yep.
If you have priests in your aid to do
Yep.
that. So,
Yep.
is there anything else about Tindril? I feel like
I
there's not a ton.
it's a fight with dragon riding in it that I didn't hate, which is kind of crazy. Like
True.
I remember them saying, and the great special thing we're doing about this fight is you're gonna have to dragon ride in the middle of it, and every single player in this game went, oh no. And then it turned out fine. I mean, it wasn't like awesome. I mean, it was cool like the first time you did the fight, right? It was cool to like be flying through the tree and chasing after him, and I thought that part was cool. It got old as you continue to prog on the fight, but it was never like awful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the phases were similar enough too that like there was never a time where we got to a point where it's like, okay, we're consistently getting to phase 3 and now we're fucking up,
Hmm.
because phase 3 is just a combination of phases 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So, I think that that felt good. It wasn't like we had to progress to this brand new part of the phase or boss fight and then potentially spend a bunch of time re-getting to this point.
Yeah.
So, uh last and certainly not fucking least is Farak. And man, oh man, this boss fight is amazing. Farak is up there and probably one of my top 5 boss fights of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking loved this boss.
Yeah. I like this boss a whole lot. I think I like Razageth better, and there are two reasons for that. The first reason is this is a fight that has a near constant debuff that going out on players that you have to constantly dispel. And I don't know why Blizzard think that's a fun healer mechanic to just like every other global someone has to be using a global to dispel someone. I think it's way worse on Mythic, where it's like on Mythic it was literally healers had to dispel on cooldown. Like every time their dispel cooldown was up, they had to use one. It's not quite as tight on heroic, but it was pretty close. It felt like that in certain ways. And I just like, I don't like the dispel game mechanic of healing very much. So I didn't love that. And then the phase 2 NPC healing is what kills this fight for me. Like I love healing. Healing is great. This game is not set up to heal NPCs well. Nobody heals in this game by clicking on characters on the actual screen, right? Everyone heals in this game by using frames, party frames, raid frames, whatever. That's how healing is done in this game. It's how healing was always done in this game, and there is not a system in this game to reliably give you frames for the NPCs in the fight. This was true in the Andu and Rin fight in Sepulchre, which is a really, really great fight that had that one annoying element to me. Um, and it's true here in this fight. It is not true in Laredar. Laredar, all 3 of the ads you have to heal show up in your frames. They are like on your like the boss frames. They're just there. Um, that was great. Thank you, Blizzard. But these ads in this fight do not, and I hated it. The joy of this fight to me was when we realized that our preservation evoker was just 10 times better at handling the healing ads than I was, and I just said, "Okay, that's your job now." I'll throw down an Efflo and also maybe throw some hots on them, but you've got it. I'll worry about the raid. And I started liking the fight a lot more at that point.
So, I do want to ask because I don't remember, were you one of our seed holders in phase 3?
I was.
I think that that might be partially why I like this fight so much.
Phase
Like,
3 is
oh my
the
god.
best single phase of a fight in this expansion. That
Yeah.
it rules. It rules.
Phase 3 of Farak, especially, so like it may sound daunting and like stupid, but like if you're one of the people who's responsible for a seed, like doing that correctly just feels so fucking good, man. And like I don't know. I don't know how they did it and didn't make it just like extremely fucking annoying, but dude, phase 3 of this fight rules.
It's the perfect, like we talked about how the phase 3 of Sarkareth was kind of chaotic, but not in like a good way. We talked about how in Razageth the phase 3 was intense, but like not in the same way that phases 1 and 2 were. And what you really want, the sweet spot you're trying to hit here, is that everything builds to this moment of culmination, that the final phase of the final fight of the final raid should be this feeling of culmination, that this is what everything has been leading to, and they just fucking nailed it. I don't even think phase 2 of this fight is particularly good, right? Like if the fight ended at phase 2, I'd be like, worst final boss of the expansion, maybe of the entire game, because I think it's an ad phase, right? It's essentially just an ad phase, and that's
Yeah.
not the best. But then yeah, this is the example of wow them at the finish and they'll forgive you for everything, because yeah, everything comes together, everything culminates. The seeds are so fun. As a seed guy, like the pressure of it was just like I could wipe the raid. I could fuck up and wipe the raid, but I didn't. But and when you do it perfectly, it's just like hell yeah. Oh, what a fight. What a raid.
Dude, Amir Drasil was a banger raid.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to rank these my way first, and then we can go to you. I honestly think we have the same list,
I don't
though. Amir
understand how we
Drasil is
could
my
not.
number one.
Yeah, yeah.
Vault's number two. Abris is fifth.
A distant third, a very distant third. Yeah.
So, I guess we'll save this. We have a fourth topic here, but we'll save that for potentially next week. It's relevant to next week as well.
Sure.
Um, but
Let,
I think that's kind of where we landed for the raids. I like that we disagreed on some things, but I think that might truly just come down to the fact that I DPS'd and you healed.
can I ask you a question as someone who's played this game more than I have historically? How does this expansion raid wise like compare to I guess every expansion, including the ones that I haven't played? Because like, to remind people, I came back in the middle of Shadowlands, so I did not play Nathria, I did not play Sanctum, I only played Sepulchre and Shadowlands. Did not play Legion, did not play BFA, did not play uh, Warlords, did not play Mist to Pandaria, except only a little bit. So, um, how does this raid? How does this expansion raid wise stack up?
I think raid wise, it stacks up decently. So it does suffer from the thing that a lot of the expansions recently have been suffering from, where it's like it has one, maybe two extremely strong raids, and then just an absolute fucking dud.
Mm-hmm.
Shadowlands had the same thing with I don't know what it is. Their season 2 raids are just fucking bad. But Sanctum of Domination in Shadowlands was just not a good fucking raid.
You know what I want?
Um,
I mean, there's a thing in storytelling, and they call it second act problems, and it's when when you're developing a story, you always have a pretty clear starting point, and you always have a pretty clear ending point, and then the biggest struggle of how to tell the story is how you, the act two is how you transition the story from the beginning to the end, and it's hard. And I think there's the same thing it seems like with these expansions where they kind of the beginning of the expansion is the part that they have very crystal clear because it's the main story of the expansion. The raid is usually very closely connected to that main story, and then they have a clear finishing point. I think they probably knew from very early in the development process that this whole thing was going to wrap up with the Emerald Dream, and then it comes time to be like, okay, but in the meantime, what do we do? And yeah, I could see that being a big problem.
Yeah, so I would say if we're gonna base this on the last like 3 expansions, I would say that this is on par, in my opinion, with Shadowlands. And the only reason Shadowlands gets saved is because Shadowlands Season 1 raid it was like a Mirdrasil level. Like it was fucking sick. Every
Mhm.
boss in there was awesome and just like great banger fucking raid. So
Every boss was awesome.
a lot of them.
Every boss was awesome.
What do you the canister boss? Is that the one that you didn't like?
No. Our penultimate boss of Castle Nathria. I thought y'all hated
Oh,
that one.
dude, nah, dude. SLG was fine
I
if
heard
you
a
didn't
lot
raid
of
Mythic.
people complain about that
If
boss.
you didn't raid Mythic, if you raided Mythic, I think SLG sucked fucking ass.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think that it's about on par with Shadowlands in my opinion. I do think that it is better in the fact that the third raid of Shadowlands wasn't as strong as I think Vault of the Incarnates was in this expansion, so I would say it wins out a little bit on Shadowlands. It's clearly better than BFA. I think BFA had Uldir and that raid was awesome, but I think the rest of BFA was just kind of eh.
I've heard
um
people really liked Nyalotha. You didn't like that one?
I I personally liked Nyalotha, but I think that Nyalotha was it suffers from the same thing that we had with Vault of the Incarnates and Aberys, where like the raid itself was easy, and then you got to the like final boss or penultimate boss, and it's just like, what the fuck just happened? Like this is way harder than everything else that we just did, and there
Mm.
was like no ramp up to it. It was just like boom, way harder.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that Uldir, in my opinion, was better as far as a raid goes, but I personally like Nyalotha. I just think that it was more of a meh kind of raid, unfortunately.
Sure. Okay.
Um,
Cool. Good to know.
what came before BFA? I can't even remember.
That was Legion.
Yes, Legion. Legion was a banger as far as raids were concerned, in my opinion. I thought the Legion raids, all of them, I fondly remembered.
Yeah, Legion is the
The Emerald
one.
Nightmare was probably the weakest, but
Mhm.
eh.
Legion is the one that I like look back now that I've come back to this game and play it a lot. That I was like, I really wish I was playing this game during that time. That's the one that
Mhm.
I feel that way on. So I'll
But
just have to wait till Legion Classic.
I'm not gonna go much further back than that because I can't fucking remember. I believe Warlords of Draenor had 2 raids that I absolutely loved, but yeah. So I'm gonna stop there.
Sure,
I'm
that's
not gonna
fair.
go any further.
Cool,
Um,
good to know.
so I guess as far as what's to come next week we are going to be doing the same thing but for dungeons in Dragonflight. And I think that that's also going to contain the dungeons that they brought back. So we're
Yeah, I
going to
mean,
be
I think
talking about like,
we'll look at the Mythic Plus seasons, right? Kind of like
yeah.
we talked mostly about the raids in these seasons, but actually looking at like how the seasons of Mythic Plus went, which will include those dungeons. Yeah.
hmm But I guess we need to wrap up. We've already gone way over time that we normally
Fuck,
have here.
fuck.
So,
Yeah.
uh, as far as everything for this week, that pretty much wraps it all up. We can talk about our 4th topic, give you a little sneak peek. Is about Fated/Awakened,
Yeah. Let me give you a
and
sneak
kind of
peek
how.
about how I feel about that.
But the question for this week is, why wasn't it Galakron that was the final boss?
Because he's dead.
I'm just kidding. The question for this week that I really want to ask everybody is, would any of the Dragonflight raids be in your top 3 raids of all time
Ooh.
list? And if so, why or why not? So as always, you can contact us over at yellingintothevoid@gmail.com. Our YouTube is at yellingintothevoid. And you can always message us over on Twitter at Into the Void. Wow.
And if you are not already subscribed to this podcast, we strongly encourage you to do so. The War Within is coming. We are a mere month away now, and that means there's a lot of exciting content to talk about and to complain about and to, frankly, to yell about. So you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found. Please subscribe. Do that right this very minute.
Also, always remember to rate us, comment. So Apple Podcasts, rate us on that. Comment on YouTube, like the YouTube video. Everything that you guys do, as far as engagement is concerned, allows us to continue making these things and grows our audience ever so larger. So please, if you like what we do here, give us a thumbs up and give us a comment on the YouTube video. But I think that that wraps up everything we have for the week. So until next week, when we're talking about dungeons, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.
Here's what I'm yelling into the void. Council bosses suck!
All right. Thanks, everybody.